We good?
We're good to go.
All right. Welcome. This is Eric Westerkamp, CEO of CaliberMind, and welcome to Funnel Lab Fridays. Today we've got a guest, Jordan from Blueprint GTM, and our own Doug Bell, and we're going to be kind of talking about sort of the impact of AI on buyer journeys and some of the new capabilities that we're releasing here today. Doug, I think you were going to kind of kick us off with a couple of questions and some of your experiences around what you're seeing in the market for sort of like buyer journeys, how people are treating them, and how they're applying some of the new large language models and AI technology toward those.
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is that the marketer's ability to understand buying cohorts, buying journeys, and the ability to react to them is incredibly episodic right now. And I'll give you an example of CaliberMind is my favorite client, but I have other SaaS clients I work with to help them grow and scale. And working with a client, and the buyer journey absolutely needs to be interrogated. And what I'm currently doing is downloading first-party data from HubSpot, and then going through that, adding it into Gen AI, and hoping it will spit out an accurate representation of a buyer's journey. And I think you guys understand the utility of that buyer's journey is probably, their average sales cycle is short, so it's probably about 2 weeks, right? And so, unless you've got, let's say, something like 6 Sense out there, which will give you a very sort of finite view into a specific buyer's journey, your ability to understand buyer journeys and your ability to understand the cohorts you're selling to is incredibly episodic. And that's what's out there. I don't know, Jordan, are you seeing other tools that can handle this well?
Can we just take like a half step back and tell me like why this matters? Like I want to set the stage for the audience, because Doug, you're like one of the brightest Doug Bells that I know when it comes to marketing. Can you help us understand exactly like what is the value of being able to understand this unique to every buyer?
Okay, so think about, I'm going to quote a couple studies here, but Gartner recently released that 81% of the buyer journey occurs outside of the purview of the seller. And where do we think that's happening? Right, it's all happening online. It's first and third party data. And so this solves for that problem in that you can't understand we're not even showing the software, we're already talking about the software, but you can real time show exactly what's happening in a specific buyer journey or a grouping of buyer journeys. And as life gets more expensive for marketers and the algorithms shift so quickly, this is sort of live or die data that allows us to react to from a performance marketing standpoint. And that's in the short term. In the long term, our buyer groups are changing so quickly, it's sort of shocking, right? So it serves two masters. One is I need to immediately be able to react and adjust my performance marketing to what's happening in my market. And the second piece is a little more strategic, which is who am I positioning and messaging to, and what are my long-term programmatic goals for actually reaching those people? It solves for both of those problems.
So basically you can deliver the right message to the right account at the right time based on what is happening for them and also for their cohort.
Yeah. And I'll kind of throw in there that when you're a small organization and you've got a number, you're selling one product to a specific set of users and things like that, this type of stuff doesn't really add a lot of value because you probably intuitively know what all of these touch points are and you're watching it. But now imagine you're an organization and you've got 15 different product lines and you've got, and you're selling into SMB and mid-market and enterprise and the US and Europe. And how do you understand, like there's not one buyer journey.
Yeah.
There's probably not 15 buyer journeys.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you go at that problem and surface it up in a way that people can actually action?
But can I put this in the context of the sellers too? Like we live in
please.
Ultimately, I'm a marketer. I live in my marketing world, but this is impactful for sellers as well. Because think about it, a seller can jump in very quickly. And again, we haven't shown this to you, but what you're going to see is you're going to see that they can understand the buying groups and exactly where people are in the buying journey. And in generative AI, and Eric will tell you this, it's sort of hard right now to apply this to data sets because you really have to be very sort of cadence and careful because you don't want to spit out ghost data to a multi-billion-dollar company, right? So we're in the stage right now, which is sort of that mapping and diagnostic stage. And that's really what this represents for sellers, right? They don't have access to the information real time.
Yeah.
That's where I think this is really impactful.
Well, and it's funny because even one of my clients, I was having a conversation with the CRO, well, like last week, a couple weeks ago, and I asked him, I said, how many products do you have? How many segments do you sell into? And how many buyers do you have? So there was like these 3 variables, right? And I don't know, they have hundreds of customers, but they all exist in these tiny buckets, 5, 10 customers here, 20 customers here, 10 customers here. And what I said to him is like, how do you expect the seller to come into the legal persona with this version of your product in banking and tell a story? Like, because last week they were selling into the marketing persona in insurance and this other version of your product. It's just it's an untenable problem without generative AI. And this is why I was really excited to see what you're up to, because I don't see most of the stuff that I encounter in the market is about taking external data. But the thing about external data is it's not really about what your customers or your leads are doing. And so talk about ghost AI ghost. It's like you're just inventing stuff from the market that's not actually attached to reality. It's not attached to any actual actions that people have taken relative to your product.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the whole, intent data versus first party data, and what's more valuable to you. And I think it's been traditionally very easy for people to take intent data and build action on it. But it's unclear, I think, for a lot of organizations, whether that's delivering a tremendous amount of value.
Yeah.
It's way harder to take your first party data and build actions onto it because there's so much of it. It's so diverse, and it's hitting you from, our average customer has 12, 13 different data sources pumping data into our platform, right? And if you don't have a platform that can process all that data and manage it for you, there's no way to actually even get on top of it, right? So I think people started with intent, but now they're realizing I really need to be focusing on my first party data, and how does that inform my buyers and what to do next?
Let's see it. I want to see this thing.
All right, should I put it on stage? Here we go.
Sure. All right, let's start over here. Oops, I'm on the wrong screen. All right. So what we've built is the ability to take, what CaliberMind does at a core level is that we process huge amounts of data for customers. We plug in all their systems, and we create a synthesized record for every account and every event and every touch point, right? That we can then build analytics and things on top of, right? So it allows us to understand somebody hit an ad up here, but then they hit your website over here, and then they talk to a sales rep here on the phone, but then here they did 12 emails. We can consolidate all that data, right? And it creates a very large set of data for customers. But the challenge that we found for many of ours was they wanted to look at that data and ask kind of more high level, they're kind of higher level, but also deeper questions about that data. So one of the questions that we kept getting asked was like, can you help me understand for a specific group of accounts, for this business segment, for this group, for enterprise, what are their buying groups? And what are their behaviors? What are their goals? What are their pain points? What type of content they're interested in? And then can you run that for, my enterprise segment, and then my SMB segment, and then can you run it for this product, and you can run it for this product, right?
Yeah.
And what you find is a lot of organizations have a high level understanding of this kind of in aggregate. But when they say, what does that mean for this group or this group or this group or this group, it gets very difficult because the data and the information is all kind of mixed together in all those platforms.
Yeah. This is the thing that actually is very interesting to me, because to get what we're looking at here requires a series of really intelligent cuts of the data, because you can't just dump. If you just say, hey, tell me who amongst all of this is good for me, generative AI doesn't have the wherewithal to be like, yo, you shouldn't do this. Right. It's like the person in marketing operations in a bank is totally different than a person in marketing operations in a B2B SaaS company.
In a SaaS company, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
What they want, their goals, their pains,
yeah.
their budgets, everything. Yeah.
And Doug talked about ghost data, and it's like you totally could screw your entire organization if you looked at this, and it's very convincing. It's very convincing. And so unless someone is making thoughtful choices about the workflow here to get to this, you could basically waste all of your dollars in your marketing spend. And that segmentation is so important. And then the generative AI only has to be able to take a bunch of information that you've already added thought to, and then explain the why, which it's very good at.
Yeah, it's very good at. And so that's exactly what's happening here. It's like, so behind this, we've created a segment, and we basically said, these are the accounts that we want to go and do some, that we're interested in understanding the buyer groups for. And that can be by, like I say, by vertical market, by product, by like whatever. It's all on our system.
You're making choices there, or you're making choices.
Yeah. So like we're working with our customers and saying, what group are we interested in here? And we'll create that segment because we have I won't go into it. We have a whole segmentation list builder in our product, and you can build that. And then what this does is it says, okay, now for that group of accounts or people or whatever, now go into the system and pull all the marketing events and all that, we call it all the event data for those companies, right? And now,
can you give me some examples of that, just for the layman here?
Well, so I mean, examples of event data or examples?
Yeah. What type of event data are you pulling in?
They touched the website, they hit the ad, they interacted with a sales rep. Everything they do with you,
downloaded content brand or something. Yeah.
And we pull data
first and third party data.
Yeah, first or third party data. We can pull intent data in here, but we can also look at, we're like, if they're doing emails back and forth, we're actually seeing the content in the email. It's all feeding into here, right?
So you the other thing, and I'm kind of curious here, presumably you can also tell me what to stop doing, which is really valuable, right? Like, so I may have an opinion. It's like, Doug really likes mugs, and I don't know, this is falling off the rails, but it's like, stop marketing mugs to Doug's.
We have $100,000 a year mug budget. Don't destroy it. Thank you very much.
Well, that's very interesting. Yeah, sorry, keep going. I was like really interested in that what not to do piece too.
Yep. And so what we're doing is we're pulling together the data, synthesizing it, and then using the LLM to kind of do what it's good at, which is like, okay, now that I've got all this raw data, summarize this and put it into a format that I can actually understand and action on. So here we're pulling out, here's, marketing operation leaders, which are different than demand gen, different goals, different pain points, right? Which are different than technology specialists, right? Or the operations people, like it's pulling these different buying groups together and telling you the kind of differences between them. And again, for a company like us, we probably know this, right? Because we're small, but the ability to segment this and say, for us to do, like, run this on our ICP, like the top of market versus the ones that are like, we have ICP versus ACP companies that we'll work with, but they're mid-market versus enterprise, right? Yeah. And you'll find that this will actually come out with some differences between those two. They tend to look at different content. They tend to do different things. It's actually interesting because we literally, as we were talking, I got a Slack. We have one of our customers using this, and the customer said that they ran this exact analysis on a couple of their groups, and it basically said, like, this was something that our most experienced buyers kind of already knew, but it confirmed what we were thinking. And it put it in a way that we are now putting it into Confluence, and we're using it as the training manual for all of our new sales reps as they come in.
Oh, yeah. And actually, this is what I want to talk about with sales reps specifically, because I worked at a company that was, a big successful company, and I was a contractor there. They they hired me to do a bunch of their data stuff, and we built chatbots for them. And I was chatting with one of the reps, and I sat with the sales reps while they were crushing it, that's what sales reps do. They crush it. I don't know why, but that's the one word that sales reps love. And this poor guy was in Texas, and he had this territory, and he had to sell to like oil and gas. And this was like a technology software that primarily was the internal search engine for a company, which is like, wait, what? Internal search engine? Like, they had one case study, and this guy was responsible for selling into like Chevron and Shell, and so just the marketing team was I think even woefully unaware of how insane it was to be able to ask this 25-year-old to understand the Chevron buyer journey with like
Right.
one piece of content. And I just thought like this poor guy, he would need something like this, which is like, oh my gosh, now it's just based on the actions of your buyers, and you
Yeah.
are able to take stuff that was trapped in some CDP somewhere or something and really get to know without having a person in marketing one time in 2006 write some case study that is never updated.
Yes, it's never updated, and it maybe has changed and all of that. Yeah. And I think that's a perfect example of what this is good for, which is, again, a lot of your senior people and marketing and groups probably know that a lot of this stuff, but it's not written down. It's not updated, right? With something like this, you can go and kind of figure it out, see if anything's changed, but then you can use it. Literally, the quote we got back is, "This will become the source of truth for our buyer groups."
Yeah,
Right. And so
well,
they're going to use it for training all of their people and say this, as they get new sales reps, as they get new marketing people, this is how we're kind of building our material off of this. Then they can update it once a month, once a quarter as things change. And then they can differentiate it based upon, different targets and different segments.
yeah, I mean, look, maybe it's a little cliche to flatter you on your own podcast, but I see the opposite of this all the time, which is a lot of companies are like, actually, weirdly, Apple did this. It's like Apple Intelligence. What does it do? It summarizes a text message. I was like, I don't need that. that is like a ridiculous use of AI. And so
right.
I think that the thing that I never see is that companies never anchor towards truth, which this is doing. And also they don't have an opinion about where AI should exist and how it should exist.
Yeah.
And I talk about this all the time when I'm pulling data from the live web for my customers, that the models do best with creative constraint with context.
Yes.
They can be ultra creative, but they must be constrained and they have to have context. And if you allow them to be creative without constraint or without context, they are amazing liars. And this is the problem, is that if I'm going to run my business on this, I better know that someone has thought so deeply about how to apply AI and what information is coming into it. And I think that that's the generation of it, of course, takes time and you got to prompt it. And but it's actually the wherewithal to say to someone, hey, marketer, you have to inject an opinion about how to build a segment. We're going to help you. We're going to make some, but you have to sort the world for AI. You have to say, this is what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that the interesting thing here is that you've said, we're not going to just throw generative AI at all of your data. Like that, this is actually a bad idea and it's way worse for you. And so that's kind of the thing that I think is,
and I see other companies out there, even in our space, doing that, where they're just like, we're just going to add LLMs and AI to everything, and you press a button, it does stuff. And I'm like, okay, but
oh god,
is that adding value?
Yeah, no, I think that's actually the other. I had a conversation with a founder the other day, and he's like, we can predict what people are buying. I said, well, or like when people buy. And I said, how'd you do it? We trained on 40 billion marketing campaigns and 468 billion touch points. And I'm like, look, man, you wouldn't be here having coffee with me if you could do that. You would just be able to instantly transform every buyer journey in every industry for every person.
You would be zooming from your island in the Caribbean, right?
Yeah. You would have Bill Gates would bring you coffee. And I just thought that it was so ridiculous. And I was reading a passage from Strunk and White, which is The Elements of Style, a very fantastic book, that overstatement diminishes the credibility to the reader, right? And I feel that that's the thing that I see this. I'm like, someone put a lot of thought into how to wield this very powerful tool. So kudos to you.
Yeah, no. And another example is, another question that we often get asked is, here's 10 or 15 companies that we just won, and here's their buyer journeys. And what we're doing, and we see this a lot, is our customers are then and Doug does this for ourselves. He then goes back into all those one and looks at all the buyer journeys and just to understand, like, what was this company and this company, and then what was the difference between this guy and this group, and what titles were different, so we could see what's going on, especially with one opportunities. And so we said, well, that's something we could just automate for you. Right. And so we built this, which is another example of an answer where we actually go through, we look at all of these buyer journeys for specific companies now. But what we say is, as we're feeding in the data, Tell us the differences between these, right? But again, we're curating it, we're setting up the data, we're prompting it, we're telling it how the information is structured and what's coming on. But with all of that in the background, we can then give you this interesting, like, here's a company and here's what they did, and here's the differences between them and the other companies in this cohort, right?
Yeah.
And here's another one. And it gives you that summarization that, to be honest, Doug was going through and some of his team were doing every week. They were going through and looking at one ops and trying to figure this stuff out. And a couple of our other companies, customers are doing that. We're like, here it is, right? And now we'll set it here. We got it showing up in our Slack. So this system allows you to actually send this to an email, send it to Slack. We're about to announce something around Salesforce. I'm going to give a sneak peek of here at the end. But like, you know, so we can put it where those people kind of are, as opposed to always in our product.
I mean, I think the interesting thing here is that, you know, there's been talk like who's going to make the single person first 100 million or $1 billion company, right? Yeah. And that's because tools like AI allow people to recreate software that used to take huge teams of engineers, right? And so what you're seeing is that you will find that companies are replaced, that the market's going to move way, way, way faster. And so as it's easier to spin up software companies, as non-developers can do it, there's a great tool called bolt.new where like I can ship pieces of code, like, and it will compile it. And so as that is the case, you're going to hear from your buyers different things at a different cadence than you've ever been able to take advantage. You would be left in the dark. And that means that you get further and further disconnected from your buyers faster and faster. Yeah. And I think that that's kind of the really interesting value here is that as that changes, you can say, wait a minute, something has shifted in the last like 2 weeks, in the last 3 weeks that I need to know about.
Yeah, as opposed to coming in every quarter being like, okay, now it's time to do our analysis of our one ops and see what's going on. Like that may be way too late.
Yeah. Well,
right here, it's like it's kind of happening live, you know, and it's monitoring it for you.
Well, and it changes the directionality of the work, which is to say that in the past, it's like, well, marketing has a sprint to go do something, but that's not the world. And you're flipping that and you're saying, look, things change at the speed of your buyers changing, not when you decide to get together at some retreat once a year. Yeah. And that's, I think, the real value is that, and that is compounding knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, it's super interesting. And I think it's where it's interesting because large language models and AI is causing the problem, but it's also going to be one of the ways you solve the problem.
Yeah.
Right, is to have these systems in place, right? And that's what we're seeing, right? And so we built this framework where for our customers, they can come into our system and say, let's define data, let's define the questions, and let's put it right in the platform, right where you need it, on top of, you know, our very powerful kind of CDP backend database.
Yeah.
Right, for customers. The last thing to show is like to be honest, one of the biggest things that we've heard from customers is from the marketing teams is you're showing me the buyer journey for this specific account. And that's super good, but I need this to be in the hands of my sales rep because I need them to know what this company has done. What content have they engaged with? What have they been working with? And some of these things, right? But I don't want my sales reps in CaliberMind. To be honest, like I don't need them in here. I don't need them playing around and seeing attribution and stuff like that. So what we're releasing,
I hope you don't take that personally.
What's that? I know, you know, like we work as an organization, we work with a lot more kind of mid-sized to larger organizations, right? And the way they interact with data is very different than small to mid-sized companies. You know, no offense to either group, but it's just they have different needs. On the enterprise side, they need to access data kind of in locations where they're already trained and understand it, right? So we have a lot of our customers are all in Tableau. Like they don't log in here; they use Tableau, and they just plug it and point it right at our system, and it's all in Tableau or Looker. Or they need it in Salesforce, right? And so we've designed for that model, right?
Wait, their sales reps are at Looker, right?
Their sales reps are not. They're at Salesforce.
Okay. I was about to say, like, I don't know a single Chad that is in Looker, and so
no.
very advanced
I actually
customers.
do have a customer where their reps do have Looker screens, actually Tableau screens, but they're pretty advanced.
Yeah, super advanced.
So what we decided was we need to figure out a way to run these buyer journeys at scale for customers. So we have customers that are now like, okay, I want you to look at what's going on with my account base every night And for every account where there's been some change and there's been some interactions, and by the way, that account has to be somewhere in my funnel. Like it's not everything that's up at this top level. It's their MQL or down or something like that. Push that buyer journey into Salesforce. And that's actually not a trivial problem because to be honest, running these things at scale, doing 1,000 LLM calls with this amount of data can actually start to blow up these systems. I'll be honest, I blew up some of Google's stuff 2 or 3 times.
How many people can claim they blew up Google? Congratulations, Eric.
Yeah, I don't know, but we hit resource constraints, right? So we found a way working with Google and things like that to be able to do these things where I can actually do 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 these a night. And what we're doing now is we're saying, and it looks pretty simple, but it's that buyer journey from created and curated by CaliberMind for a specific account placed right into Salesforce. Now, we've set it up as just these simple fields because we don't want customers to have to install a package or do all this thing or go through all that headache. It's like, here's one field, add it to your account, and every night this thing will get updated with the data if anything has changed.
Yeah. And I
now,
think
sales rep can look in here and be like, oh, what have they done? What's their journey? This is an old one, right? Because I didn't want to show a recent one. But like, who am I working with, before they make an outbound call or do an email or anything like that?
I think it's so interesting that so much of the data that we consume is point in time. And point in time data is not nearly as interesting and useful as longitudinal data, which is what is changing and what has changed. And so if I'm a sales rep and if I just go, I just describe you, that's a lot less interesting than describing your journey, right? It's like, where did you come from and why are you here and where are you going next? And so it's really hard to take a flat object and turn it into to a journey.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, that the really interesting kind of next step here and where this is taken, because you can say, look, this is where you came from and I can kind of forecast where you're going. And suddenly for a sales rep, I don't have to be like, hey, Eric, it's Tuesday. What were you doing on Monday? It's like, have you put your glasses on this morning? And it's like, and that's what a lot of these messages come out to be.
Yeah.
And I can say something much more interesting, like, Eric, other people in your position have found that this piece of content that we've created is really useful for these reasons.
Yeah.
Like I looked at your activity and I couldn't find that you have read this. This particular piece was really interesting to Carolina. She's your counterpart at another one of our customers.
Another company, yep.
Oh my gosh. Like a useful message from someone that was not equipped by marketing, because they weren't, but was equipped by CaliberMind to be able to understand that transition and support sales, where marketing has to invest once in this technology, and suddenly your reps can communicate with so much more useful information for the buyer. And
you can see where these start to blend together, where the analysis of here's what's working, here's the differences, here's what this type of company is like, and then having the buyer journey this company, and then the next step is, okay, look up other companies that were like this one, and what did they do, and what worked, and here's a playlist, a playbook, sales rep, of things that have worked for companies like this.
Okay,
here are other people at companies like this, and things like that. This all could flow right through pretty easily.
I've got a series. Sorry.
So before you jump in, I have to say this, but this goes all the way back to how do we provide utility from CaliberMind to sellers. This is a really, really good example. But I will tell you, we're not the first organization to come up with this. And as I see this, I giggle, because there is a platform in our space, a MarTech platform, I won't mention their name, and they have come up with this same thing, but crowdsourcing it across the marketing and selling team. Right. So
you mean based on their team, not the buyers.
No AI, just zero AI. So like there are people trying to react to this need in the marketplace. They're not using AI, which is mind blowing to me. But it's becoming very clear. And again, I'll go back to my experience with my accounts. You have so much folklore. So Jordan, you talked about sellers know who they're selling to. Not always. Quite often, I mean, obviously they knew who they let me finish here on this one. They have an understanding of who they sell well to, right? But they don't understand the totality of the buying groups quite often. And when you start digging in, you realize it's folklore. right? It's just not accurate. And so every time I see something like this, my thought is this sort of advances the common shared knowledge of a go-to-market organization in the way we haven't been able to do ever.
I have a controversial question here, which is like, can they take advantage of this? Because this feels so light years ahead of what companies are not only able to do today, but how do they integrate this so that they can really leverage all of this work?
Yeah, it's actually surprisingly, I wouldn't say simple, but because of the infrastructure, I'll be honest, we started off as an attribution organization, right? And so we kind of cut our chops on how to grab data from all these sources and bring it in,
Yeah.
to really do modeling and attribution, all these things, right? But along with that, we figured out how to really do a good job of creating these event data streams and stitching data together, right? And so our CaliberMind as a product has years and years and years of custom pipelines and data feeds and things so that we know how to take all this data and put it on that journey and stitch it and do things. Once you have that, and that's actually a non-trivial problem. I would say this stuff is easier to do than the data engineering part. But once you've got the data engineering, and we built our system, so I can go and I can click on this one and add Salesforce and then add Marketo and then add this, and boom, it's all stitched together. Once you have that, you then need to understand how to ask questions and curate data out of it in a way these LLMs can use. Again, back in our product, but our customers are adopting this now that we've actually taken all that and gotten it to here's a simple buyer journey. It's kind of unbelievable how fast they're asking for this. And
Wow.
and I have, companies that are in the 30, 40, $50 billion a year range that are moving heaven and earth with their legal terms to be able to turn this stuff on. And what we're finding is like some companies are like, because we pass all these security checks and all the data is in a single project for every customer, and the LLMs don't actually even run outside of those projects, we're actually getting across that threshold faster than a lot of other companies are. And so we have a number of companies where the only way they can actually access and play and use these tools is through CaliberMind.
Wow. And I know we're almost out of time. Sorry, Eric, I know we're almost out of time, but I have to mention something. So I was recently on the phone, long conversation with one of CaliberMind's customers, one of our sort of brilliant customers who are constantly thinking about these things. And their comment after having been introduced to Ask Cal was, to your point, Jordan, what do I make of this? How do I act on this data? And their suggestion, which was, I thought, quite brilliant, was really there's a methodology that hasn't been defined yet.
Yes.
Right. There is a way of using this data in real time and effectively integrating into your marketing plans. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And what they had said was really this is the equivalent to the creation of DevOps in reaction to agile development. Right. So sort of to your question, and look, you made the statement about being too declarative. Well, I'm going to be careful here, Jordan, but I do think this and a lot of other tools out there that are producing real-time insightful data are going to require a sea change in marketing. The methodology has to change. And I will tell you, I've had hands on this data, and Eric on our weekly one-on-ones be like, what are you doing with the data? I'm like, I can't react fast enough to it.
Actually, I'm going to say the quiet part out loud, which is like, I think that this is the input for the AI SDR. Yes. Like if you're talking about the middle of the funnel, it's like, there's no reason, like with this input, that thing can send an amazing next step email that your sales reps never can. There's no reason why after you've got here, which is the hard part, that you can't take the next step and deploy it to channels.
Right. And I would say it's okay. So then I'm saying I would deploy it to bots. What are your marketing bots doing on your site? Right. So I would see it completely differently. But the point is like the next level here is once we have this, it is really about deploying this with methodologies. I do think this is a sea change for marketing. So I hope people are paying attention.
Yeah. And I'll say that Jordan, to your point is I actually have one of my kind of forward thinking customers, and they are taking this data and moving it in, and then they are running another large language model to create email content on it. And then they're sending that out, I believe, out through SalesLoft.
Yeah. Directly. Yeah, of course. I mean, of course they would do that because this message is not about, did I brush my teeth in the morning? It's not about, hey, I'm trying to close my quarter, I'll give you a discount. Like it's none of that. It's that I understand you. And you can't understand someone unless you've done all of the hard work that you have to make this seem so simple. And it's so complex that even I would argue that maybe even the CMO of the company would have a really, really hard time, or even the CRO, doing this for 10 random accounts because it's just too hard for any human to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And so I think that I think you should integrate with the X11s or whatever and say, hey, forget the top of the funnel, the mid funnel here. You just have so much low hanging fruit. You just have to take one more step. And that step is not hard.
Super cool. All right. Well, I think we're at time here. Jordan, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Very, very insightful. Doug, again, thank you. And I believe we are off with Funnel Lab Fridays for a few weeks and then starting up our new batch in January. Is that correct?
See everybody in January.
Well, wait, we should also say thank you for coming. Thank you this year for coming.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Yeah, Funnel Fridays. Like, thanks so much, and have an absolutely lovely holidays, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Absolutely.
Jordan, thank you. You should be our closer every episode.
All right. Well, Jordan, it's almost like you do this professionally.
No, what are you talking about?
Right. As opposed to the rest of us that are doing this off of our cell phone.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers all.
Cheers.